is the Vintage RPG Podcast, your source for the best in classic and contemporary RPGs. With your hosts, Hambone and Stu.
Welcome to the Vintage RPG Podcast, coming at you again from the clubhouse hidden somewhere in the swamps of New Jersey. I'm John Hambone McGuire, and with me, as always, is the editor-in-chief of Unwinnable.com. He says rainy days and Mondays never really bring him down because he's been working from home for years. Stu Horvath.
Do you think the audience can tell when it's like a joke that actually gets me and then the joke that like I'm politely laughing to because we already went over it earlier?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, I literally just pulled that out of my ass as you told me what the episode was about today.
That was great. That was gold. That was a belly laugh.
Well, Stu, how are you doing today?
Pretty good. Really good now.
We are going to be talking about A Visitor's Guide to the Rainy City. I actually know nothing about this, so why don't you tell our listeners what it's about?
So it's a zine. I think this might be the first zine that we cover on Vintage RPG Podcast.
Woo!
It is from ZineQuest 2. I've been trying to get through reading all of my ZineQuest 2 zines. I bought a lot of them. And let me tell you, man, like, I love role-playing games. I don't know if you know this about me.
I would never have thought that by the sheer volume of paper that exists in your garage and inside and around your house.
Right? It's surprising. Like, of all the people, Stu likes role-playing games. The secret is that I just hate trees. And I figure that role-playing games is the most efficient way to destroy them all. No, I love role-playing games. I love the zine scene that has developed around role-playing games. I think that it is the best and like freshest and most exciting thing to happen to role-playing games in forever. I feel like that sort of the OSR scene and story game indie scene has sort of, I don't want to say stagnated, but like come into its own in a way that like things are taking a little bit longer to come out. They might be like a little bit less exciting than they could be. But man, the zine scene is just like every single zine that I picked up is just gangbusters good. Like they're just these high concentration doses of super creativity. You got like systems, you got just books that are just like loads of random tables, you got new mothership stuff, you got bunches of solo games, so many great art. The variety of stuff that came out in ZineQuest 2 and just in general in 2020 is astounding. If you're interested in role-playing games at all right now in 2020 and going forward, I think that you really, really need to start paying attention to the zines, because I think that's where like the next waves of stuff that we're going to be playing for years to come is going to come out of. Which brings me to A Visitor's Guide to the Rainy City. It is a system agnostic source book for a city. I mean, I guess you would call it a campaign setting. It definitely implies a larger sort of multiverse than is detailed within its pages. It's written in an in-universe style. It's literally a travel guide. And it is 100% the best book like this that I have read in a very, very long time.
Well, that's a bold claim.
It is so good. I hesitate to put like a year mark on it because I have trouble without looking stuff up, knowing when stuff came out. But like easily last 5 years since I've been doing the feed, like this is one of the best things that I've read for role-playing games ever, really, is what it comes down to. It is just so good. It does what it does so perfectly well. It makes me want to visit this city. I get such a clear vision of what this city is like. And it makes me want to set games there, even though like it doesn't really match my personal, like if I was going to run a D&D game, like the tone isn't the same. Like it isn't what I would be most comfortable running a D&D game in, but I still want to. It still gives me enough raw material to constantly kind of like overcome my hesitance. It's fantastic, Hambone. I wanted to close out the year with this one just to be able to say, like, look, I read this in 2020 and I told you all about it. Because this one feels important to me. Like, we're going to be talking about this one for a long, long time. It's just that good.
Yeah, I mean, I love stuff like this. I mean, look, I came up in the Jersey punk rock scene, and there was the idea of what a zine was back then in, like, the 90s.
Yeah.
In the early 2000s, where, you know, it was kids doing it themselves, making their own fanzines, their own magazines. You know, one of my best friends in the entire world, George Bungalow, had Life in a Bungalow, and it was a launching point in the purest and most energetic and youthful DIY sense for a lot of people's careers and forays into the outer world, be it in the entertainment industry or be it into publishing, be it wherever. But like, it all started so small, and it all started with the seed of like, hey, I could just go and put together this thing myself, go print it up wherever I can find that printer, staple it together, and sell it at a show for a few bucks. Like, in the most entrepreneurial sense, I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. And now I really enjoyed what came out of ZineQuest 1 and ZineQuest 2, because here we are, it's that punk rock DIY spirit again. Like, I'm going to write my own thing. And now with like technology and, you know, the years that have spanned between the 90s and now, like the ability to put together a top quality product where you can pour all your heart into it, you can pour all your energy into it, and actually have it look like you see it in your mind.
Yep.
Man, priceless.
Yeah.
Absolutely priceless.
This is a high quality professional product. Like, it is a zine in that it is a chapbook, which is, you know, saddle stapled in the middle, a bunch of folded pages. But other than that, like, the cover stock is really nice. It's got like a texture to it that reminds me of like a pocket guidebook, maybe from like the turn of the previous century, not this one. The art is fantastic all the way through. The artist's name is Bill Spytma, and everything is done in a faux medieval woodcut style, which just really sells the setting. There are little bits of like Victoriana in the setting as well, which I guess one might argue gives it a bit of a steampunk flair. I would disagree because I don't really like steampunk, and I really like this book. As much as it feels like medieval and sort of fantasy land, there's like a little bit of the Victorian. I hesitate to compare it to Neil Gaiman's stuff because I don't really like Neil Gaiman stuff. But there is sort of like a little bit of that kind of English whimsy. Yo, you know what it reminds me more of is Susanna Clark, Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell.
Oh.
That kind of vibe.
Nice.
Yeah, so like sort of whimsical, sort of lighthearted, sort of like a social comedy, like a Jane Austen kind of thing. Like, you could see that kind of game being played out in the city. They call it the Rainy City because it rains constantly. It never stops raining. During the rainy season, they can't even light fires, so there's like alchemical salts that will cook food, and like the ways they get around the constant rain and damp, it all like sort of suffuses the culture of the city. The city is basically an island, and again, like Merkborg, it seems like this is the end. That at least the multiverse surrounding this particular world is collapsing, and the Rainy City is taking on refugees. Ships will constantly be coming in and hoping to find refuge here. So there is sort of like an idea that there's lots of different strange people in the city, not just from different places of the world, but from different worlds entirely. There's like a class structure, you know, there's rich folks, there's ambassadors, there's wizards. There's also a floating pirate settlement called Rickety. It's literally just like a bunch of boats like strapped together where there's like a pirate society. Just all this stuff. Every page is just full of like cool and interesting ideas. Instead of like rats, I guess they do have rats in the city, but they also have like a big ooze and slime and mold problem.
Gross.
But no, that's great. Oozes and slimes and molds are like some of the weirdest, like, why are these in Dungeons and Dragons? And they constantly have a problem with them in the city. And I love the idea of like the puddings as like pests, like urban pests.
I do love that idea.
I mean, it's gross. And they have like a whole society of people like ooze exterminators. It's so good. They introduce an idea and then they very specifically try and figure out like how this element would be dealt with by the society around it. And out of that comes all of these interesting ideas.
Hey, man, you won't get any pushback from me because you know I'm a guy that loves a good gelatinous creature, especially if it's in a cube form.
Yeah.
And also, like, you know, hearing about this and reading up on this a little bit, I think that it speaks volumes about this game where it takes two aesthetics that you really don't enjoy, things that harken to Neil Gaiman and things that are steampunk-ish in nature, and yet you still love this and consider it to be one of the best things you've read in 5 years. So that really does show to me the kind of ingenuity and, you know, dedication that they put into something like this, where often you see in other games, they will lean a little further into the aesthetic of other creators to the point where it kind of becomes bland. And here in the Rainy City, they found a way to kind of lean towards certain ideas and aesthetics and make it transcend those ideas and kind of really make it their own and make it something special and unique. So very, very impressive book.
Another thing that it kind of reminds me of is a less dark and dreary version of Jeff Vandermeer's City of Saints and Madmen. You know, there's mushroom people in that and sort of a dreary quality. But like this definitely is sort of like a little bit brighter, a little bit funnier, I think. There's just sort of like a sly bit of humor throughout the whole book, no matter how grim the subject matter is. Every couple pages is dedicated to a different neighborhood, and in that you get a gloss of the major locations of interest, the people of interest. It gives you things to do. Prove the pudding. Our city is awash in oozes, slimes, and blobs. Join the guildmaster, Aloysius Grunt, in the noblest profession, crawling through the pipes, sticking your head down drains, and reaching into cracks to clear homes and businesses from infestation.
I love it.
It's so good.
That's awesome.
And yeah, like that's the tone of the book. It's just sort of like helpful and like plucky, and it's ceaselessly creative and interesting, and there's so many hooks without them being pulled out of context into like a random table or a chart or a list. Like it just happens. You read the book and you're just like, I have all these ideas now. I really appreciate the fact that it happens naturally. I think so often you kind of pull stuff out to highlight it, and that's good in that like it makes life easier, but it also kind of makes them more abstract. And writing a book like this, I'm sure, was very difficult, but I think the overall effect is much more pleasing as the potential GM reading it with an eye towards running it. It felt real good. I don't know how to explain it. Like I always feel good when I read RPGs, but like this was a really specific, like, ooh, like, I wish they were all like this, you know?
Well, this is definitely a book that's gotten Stu firing on all cylinders, and you can definitely get copies of it over at superheronecromancer.com. They are the publisher of A Visitor's Guide to the Rainy City, and both Stu and I highly, highly recommend you check out this zine. Stu, do you have any final thoughts on A Visitor's Guide to the Rainy City?
My final thought is that I can't wait for more. And there actually already is some more. Lots Miscellany has been released on Drive-Thru RPG. I think that there's definitely a PDF because I have it. I haven't read it yet. And I think there's a print on demand too. I hope that you check it out and read it and enjoy it and bother these people to make more, because I definitely want more. And it's all about me. So, you know, just do what I ask.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Help Stu continue to fill up his collection of dead trees.
The trees aren't going to die on their own. You got to help me, folks. Got to kill them.
Folks, this is another amazing episode of the Vintage RPG Podcast. Stu, where can the people find you?
They can find me on Instagram at Vintage RPG, posting stuff, unfortunately not on paper, every day about role-playing games, zines, board games, and other nerdy, gamey stuff.
You can find me on the Twitter at Handbreaker. I tweet about board games. I tweet about cute animals. I tweet about Dungeons & Dragons. You follow my day-to-day adventures in podcasting and in life over at John Hambone McGuire on Instagram. If you like the podcast, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. Your reviews really do help other listeners to find us. If you love the podcast, think about joining our Patreon. Patreon.com/vintagerpg, if only to get the behind-the-scenes look at Stu's upcoming tree-killing book and a look at my RPG, which does not have a vendetta against trees, but will be printed on paper either way. You also have early release episodes, and we have a killer Discord community that we'd love you to be a part of, so patreon.com/vintagerpg.
Brothers and sisters, only together can we end the tyranny of the trees.
Oh my God. Folks, thanks for listening to the Vintage RPG Podcast. For Stu Horvath, I'm John Hambone McGuire. May the dice always roll in your favor.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to like, review, and subscribe to the podcast. Every review helps other listeners to find us. The Vintage RPG Podcast is a ham-fisted production. Music by Dega West. Art by Schaefer Brown. If you like the podcast, you should also consider becoming a patron at patreon.com.